Coming into this weekend, expectations for the box office for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny were very, very low. Excessively low. So low, in fact, that if Indiana Jones only does the numbers that it's projected to do, it will certainly lose, at a minimum, $200 million worldwide. Yet somehow, it ended up turning out worse than that. It somehow underperformed the cratered expectations for this movie. And it's nuts what's going on here. Obviously, The Flash is vying for the title, as we speak, of the biggest money loser in Hollywood history. And The Flash cost $100 million less to make than Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. What if I told you on opening weekend, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny performed worse than The Flash worldwide? Yes, it's absolutely true. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny dug up an estimated $60 million in its domestic debut, a troubled start for the fifth and final installment in the famed adventure action series starring Harrison Ford. The hope is now that the Disney and Lucasfilm tentpole will hold in well beginning this week as Americans celebrate the 4th of July holiday. The movie, directed by James Mangold, should finish Tuesday with a domestic total of $82 million. Overseas, the movie launched to $70 million for a global start of $130 million. So opening weekend, The Flash did $55 million domestic. So Indiana Jones actually outperformed it by $5 million, even though the budget was $100 million more. Yet, The Flash did $140 million opening weekend worldwide, while Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny earned $130 million worldwide. This is one of the biggest debacles in Hollywood history. How they ever got here, how they ever spent $300 million on a goddamn Indiana Jones movie is beyond me. And they're kind of reaping what they sow. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, Wes, you're gloating. You're happy that Indiana Jones failed. You're happy that Harrison Ford failed. Absolutely not. First of all, they never should have made another Indiana Jones movie after The Last Crusade. That is literally the best finale in movie history, and certainly any series of movies history. I like Return of the Jedi. That's an amazing movie. The ending, as far as Star Wars goes, isn't as good as the ending of The Last Crusade. It's absolutely perfect. They never should have made the last two movies to begin with. I do not want to see Indiana Jones fail. I do not want to see Star Wars fail. I don't want to see Pixar fail, and I certainly don't want to see any of these other big franchises that I've enjoyed fail at the box office. That is not something I want. Do I want to see Kathleen Kennedy fail? Absolutely. Do I want to see the newfangled Hollywood idea that the story is now secondary to whatever the message or propaganda that you're trying to push through in your film? Do I want that to fail? Absolutely. Do I want the incessant need to do all kinds of race and gender swaps and just change characters whole cloth to fit a modern audience because the original story just wasn't good enough as it was told? We got to update it now because new audiences just aren't going to respond to that. Do I want to see that fail? Absolutely. I want to see all those things fail. And I don't want to see my favorite franchises like Star Wars, like Marvel, like DC, like Indiana Jones, like Transformers, or any of the stuff that I've ever loved. And I don't want to see that stuff get caught up in all this. But I can't change that. And that's what's happened. And I don't feel bad for Harrison Ford, and I don't feel bad for Indiana Jones fans because you knew this was going to happen. Harrison Ford got paid a ton of money. Everyone knew going into this that the movie wasn't going to be very good. Harrison Ford wasn't going to be treated very well as Indiana Jones. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, it's supposed to be a vehicle for her to take over, and she slaps the shit out of him, treats him with disrespect throughout the whole movie, because that's Disney's winning formula now. If you have an established male hero that an entire generation loved and, kind of responded to, you bring him back, you make him a piece of shit, and then you bring in a younger female version, and then you bring in a younger female hero to go and slap him around and show him that she was always better. And no one likes that stuff. I'm tired of it. I'm glad it failed. But, it just sucks that it's Indiana Jones. But the writing wasn't on the wall to where this movie might lose $300 million. That is a lot of cheddar. That would be the biggest financial loss in Hollywood history if it continues on with this trajectory, which it doesn't have to, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. But this could lose 50% more than The Lone Ranger and John Carter did, the two biggest bombs in the history of Hollywood. Both of them lost $200 million stone cold. Not surprisingly, both of those films were also produced by Disney. Disney is not the winning formula. They cannot take anything from the past and remake it nowadays and have anyone trust them. I do not trust them to do any character or any series or any universe justice anymore. I've seen it too many times. The filmmakers had hoped for a domestic launch closer to $65 million, but a B plus cinema score and tepid reviews are likely hampering word of mouth. One bright spot is the 88% positive audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Dial of Destiny is a sequel to 2008's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which posted an impressive 3-day debut of $100 million. Crystal Skull, like the first three indie films, was directed by Steven Spielberg. And I imagine when you see this on the big screen, it's apparent that one of the greatest filmmakers of all times, Steven Spielberg, isn't associated with this anymore. Not that James Mangold is a bad director. He's not a great director. He's had a couple of great movies, but he's also had a lot of misses. But, you know, he did Logan, and I like Logan. We had a weird debate on Comics Aficionados where everyone was kind of trash, and I was like, you guys are crazy. That's a good movie. He felt like he would have been a good choice to carry on the indie legacy and at least maybe say goodbye to the character with some type of dignity and a fond farewell that people could enjoy, but obviously that isn't happening. The good thing is, likely because of the Rotten Tomatoes score of 88% positive audience score, which I imagine is review fluff. They call it review bombing when people go in there and supposedly give a film a negative review even though they never seen it. Well, review fluffing was when people go into Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and give them outrageous positive scores even though they haven't seen the film. Or they did and they know it wasn't that good, but they just kind of feel bad. Phoebe Waller-Bridge deserved better. She didn't deserve the 5 that really the movie was. We'll give her a 10. I'm sure there's a lot of review fluffing in there, but it's not as bad, nearly as bad as the Flash audience score. And the cinema score being a B plus, that sounds good, right? Above average, almost an A, right? When it comes to the cinema score, anything below an A minus is actually pretty darn bad. In fact, I believe the Flash got a B. So this is a little bit better than what the Flash got. And there's a good chance, at least domestically, that the second week fallout won't be 72% like it was for the Flash. And that is an outrageous drop from first week to second week. But that being said, for this movie to like hold out and actually make some money, the dropout for week 2 is going to need to be like 20% or something absolutely unheard of, especially for one of these big blockbuster movies that when they open up, it's in 4,500 screens. It's not limited screening. And then all of a sudden it's a hit and all of a sudden it kind of gets bigger as it goes along. This thing is as big as it's going to get on an opening weekend, and that's how blockbuster movies work. And this is, it's devastating. It's devastating to Disney, certainly in their bottom line. It's devastating to Lucasfilm and their bottom line, and it's certainly devastating for the future of Indiana Jones. But to be honest, the character probably shouldn't have had a future. And if it did have a future, it should have been as some type of reboot. And I don't want to see an Indiana Jones reboot either, but Harrison Ford is goddamn 80 years old. He doesn't need to be in an action flick anymore. And like I said, The Last Crusade is literally the best goodbye Indiana Jones could have ever had in the history of the world anyway. I don't even know why they went back to this. Well, I mean, I know why. They thought there are a few more drops of blood in that stone to twist out because Hollywood has no more original ideas anymore. There are no more visionaries like a George Lucas or a Steven Spielberg or even really a James Cameron. Obviously, James Cameron's still there, but he's only doing Avatar now. We don't really have any of these visionaries. We have these guys that make music videos and call themselves directors, and there just isn't a whole lot of creativity to tap into anymore. And now you have kind of a dead box office. Yes, there are hits here and there, but for the most part, people aren't really impressed anymore. The Indiana Jones movie series once again sees Harrison Ford as a swashbuckling archaeologist. The 80-year-old actor stars opposite Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Antonio Banderas, John Rhys Davies, Toby Jones, Boyd Holbrook, Ethan Isidore, and Mads Mikkelsen. Keeping the film series' ongoing Nazi theme alive, Dial of Destiny's storyline revolves around an ancient device being chased by Jones and a villain played by Mikkelsen, which feels like Indiana Jones, and supposedly, from the way I understand it, the first 15 minutes of this movie absolutely feels like a really good Indiana Jones movie. But then I was told you should exit the theater and just skip the rest because it's not very good. Not surprisingly, around this time, and we kind of knew this was going to bomb, and I think it was picking up steam, getting through the weekend. You're like, oh my goodness, it's going to bomb worse. The numbers are going to be worse than The Flash, which were absolutely like incomprehensible almost once you saw those original Flash numbers and they actually came out. You know, this thing being $10 million under that is absolutely amazing. The rumor that Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, that was supposedly, hand selected by George Lucas to succeed him once Disney bought Lucasfilm from George, supposedly she's out at Lucasfilm now. I'll believe it when I see it. But I will say this. There was a strong rumor at the end of 2022 that in 2023, it would be Kathleen Kennedy's final year with the studio. She'd already submitted her resignation, and that she wouldn't actually be leaving until the end of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny because she wanted to leave the studio on a high note. Now, obviously, if that holds true, and there's a lot of smoke there, I don't know if there's any fire, we shall see, she ain't going to be leaving Lucasfilm on a high note. There is no success when it comes to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And when you think about the amount of money or expected money lost by Kathleen Kennedy at this point, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Solo is the only Star Wars movie ever to lose money. It looks like if it doesn't trend up and the box office hold isn't something that we could never expect, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is going to be vying for the biggest flop in Hollywood history to this point. The box office returns for that Star Wars trilogy that obviously opened up with The Last Jedi and ended up with The Rise of Skywalker. The box office receipts went down, down, down as people lost faith in Lucasfilm, they lost faith in Disney, and they certainly lost faith in Star Wars itself. She is probably, I would say conservatively, with the direction that she's put this company on and the decisions that she's made and the changes that she's made and the reshoots and having to redo everything over and over and over again. I mean, how many directors has this woman hired that never even made a goddamn movie for Lucasfilm? I bet you that woman has cost Disney, as being the president of Lucasfilm, like $1 billion. Not just in losses at the box office, but money that would have been made if somebody competent was in charge and knew how to hire people and actually execute production at that scale and actually satisfy the fans. Star Wars has never been lower. Obviously, Indiana Jones has never been lower. Something like Willow, I don't know why they brought it back to begin with. You know, I like Willow because it came out when I was a kid. It wasn't a hit then, and when you see what it is now, you're like, well, if there was ever any money to be made off of Willow, that is dead too. This woman has killed everything. And it appears her final victim will be Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones himself, after she already killed him off as Han Solo. What a terrible retcon of that character. Whatever. I'm not going to get into this goddamn Star Wars stuff or I'm going to get angry. That's the news. It's as bad as it ever could have been. It's actually worse than they expected. And with what they were expecting, they were probably going to lose $200 million. Are they going to lose $300 million? Sure as hell looks like it. We shall see what happens. But this isn't the first time that they knew something was wrong with Indiana Jones. They've been doing test screenings. They've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. There's lots of reshoots and rewrites and everything on there because there's a full-on panic from Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm once they realized just how bad this movie was going. Unfortunately, they threw more money into it, and that did not solve the problem. They just made it a lot worse. If you don't see the video here, there's also a link in the video description.